Hello, friends. Misty Klobuchar here with Marketing Sweats. I am so excited to introduce you to Kadri Holmes. I have him on the show today. He was a recommendation from me from our executive creative director, Chris Main. And Kadri runs a production company called Curiosity Productions out of Chicago, Illinois. And he is going to talk a little bit about his background in all things video, motion media, and overall creative production. We haven't really featured as many guests on the show in that area or discipline of marketing, but it's a huge area of focus for Simantel. In fact, I'm sort of in the weeds right now of planning a very large-scale commercial production in Las Vegas. And so I'm excited to dig in with all of the technical and business and leadership topics that are required in this area of our business. So join me in welcoming Q. Q, how are you? I'm so glad that you're here today. Let's start at the very beginning. Give me a sense of your story, where you're from, and kind of how you came up in the world.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Florida, and I got a scholarship to go to a school outside of the Chicago area. It was an art school. I originally thought I was going to be an actor. So I had the opportunity to really grow up around some very interesting personality, folks who were interested in pottery and visual arts and, performers and dancers, which was really cool. And I remember I had a professor at the time that said to us, if you do not like the people you are around, get out of this business now.
Yes.
Because he said there will be colorful personalities, right, for the rest of your life, and you should get used to embracing them and making them a part of your world. But ultimately, I ended up staying in Chicago. I began freelancing. As a freelancer, I was the intern originally starting at David O'Connor Casting. I then became a PA. Then from PAing, I went on to coordinating and managing, and then line producing, and then ultimately, starting my own company, Curiosity Productions.
Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about your production company. I want you to kind of give our audience a sense of the kind of work you do. I was on your website this morning, lots of different kinds of projects. So walk us through that.
So I purposely, when I started this company, wanted to build something a little different, right? I wanted originally to make sure that first, some of the creatives on the team were younger. What we were finding at the time when this started, there was a complete disconnect. If you had said Instagram to a director, they're like, well, what are they talking about? What do they need us to do with this? They were predominantly traditional broadcast directors, right? I also realized that we lacked gay directors, we lacked Black directors, we lacked women directors, and we also lacked Latino directors and Asian directors. So anyone that falls into a minority category, we were lacking, right, in the ecosystem. And I remember questioning, I'm like, why is this, right? Why do we not have these directors? So the original batch of directors that I had really represented that. I was a little naive, obviously, because when it comes to marketing and advertising, folks want to know that you can get their message across. And I oftentimes spend time educating. I was at an agency the other day, and I said to them, I go, you guys spend so much time looking for 6 to 7 pieces on a director's creative reel. I've sold a director on 1 moment, on 3 seconds, because it's not about creating the same thing that your competition's done, right? It is about feeling like you're a part of a group. But how do you stand out? What is that one thing, that this artist has that makes that person different? And I do believe that authentic voices should tell the stories.
Sure.
There are cultural nuances for me as a Black man that only another Black man will understand on the screen.
Absolutely.
And I always say, with the exception of Steven Spielberg in The Color Purple, okay. Right? Unless you're Steven Spielberg, who directed The Color Purple, there are just certain nuances. And I think we have to respect that in the art of filmmaking. I think when women come to the table, there's a perspective that women bring that is so crucial and instrumental in how stories are told. Right. So when we are featuring moms, or we are featuring, women as, the protagonists or the antagonists in these stories, why not let a female perspective actually, tell these stories? So that was kind of the thought process there.
I'd love to hear some of the people stories on how you feel like you've impacted lives, and, maybe some of the work, how that diversity perspective has influenced the way you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot deny the doors that it has opened, right? And I am not and I want to be clear for any of your listeners that are listening, my company is not a DEI hire. My company is a company owned by a gay black man that cranks out technology, creatively driven work, right? And when I look at what it has attracted to me, I get requests from directors all the time, or editors, or photographers, right? That are looking for representation that say, hey, Q, I feel like our values align in your thought process and how you view the work that we do. Is my entire roster of diverse people? No, because that's not the makeup of our country. That's not the makeup of our world. What I wanted to do was just create something that represented our world. You know,
Sure.
we're all human, we all bleed red. So when I look at some of the artists, I'll point out some like Sheldon Candace, amazing director. I don't know if you remember the piece when we found out that there was a black ballerina, Misty
Mm,
Copeland.
yeah.
And I said to him, I remember meeting with him in LA. And of course, he's doing the director dance with me where they play hard to get and blah, 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 blah. And I meet with him in LA. And literally, I say to him, I go, I want to sign you because of that one piece. Because with that piece, you actually changed the culture. You know, I said, you told the world that we had a black ballerina. And prior to you doing that piece, no one knew it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
No one knew that. So it was so instrumental, you know, in shaping culture. And I think that's what we need. We need, you know, cultural warriors and people who are committed to being unapologetic about the stories that actually, you know, get told. I look at another photographer that I signed, Michael Mays. We signed him as a director photographer. I remember looking at his tabletop work and how detailed it was and the nuances of his work and how, as a white director, when it came to creating stories, if we were focused on Latin market or this project that we did for Diners Club, where we had to visit 75 countries, there was an authenticity there and there was a desire to make sure that those countries were represented properly with the propping and the utensils and the glassware. So I always talk about cultural relevancy and cultural perspective. And those are the types of folks that, you know, I truly do love engaging with.
When I got your bio, Q, you're a member of so many boards and nonprofits and very involved in your community. And you even introduced me to the Chicago Advertising Federation and got me connected. So talk a little bit about why that's so important to you and maybe some of the motivations behind that.
Yeah, all of the boards are interconnected. I have told folks I won't join a board unless there's a through line, unless there is a desire to see new faces in the seats, unless you want opposing views to the status quo. And so, if that is not a part of the existence of the boards, then I don't do them. I will say, like I sit on the IPA board, which is the Illinois Production Alliance. We're a lobbying board. And so we were instrumental in getting the tax credit in place as a whole in Illinois to drive business here
That's
for
great.
commercial production. We also just put in a request for an increase of that as well, which we're hoping that we will have legislative support in the state. Separately from that, you mentioned the Chicago Advertising Federation. I love that board because these are the brands. These are the agencies that are making the decisions. And I can help bridge the conversation from the vendor side of the business directly to the brand so that they then understand, well, this is what your vendors are being tasked with. And then finally, I'll mention, you know, the AICP. They're like the business. So I sit on the national board for AICP. That's the Association of Independent Commercial Producers. We're basically the governing body over about $5.5 billion in advertising production revenue, representing the production companies back to the ANAs, back to the 4As on how we negotiate contracts and how commercial production is done. And then, of course, my Free Spirit Media Board, because I got to mention them. I'm a board member emeritus for them. They are focused on getting minorities off the street and into film. That type of work helps me see on a day to day basis when I go to set, women on my set, Black folks on my set, Latinos on my set, folks with disabilities on my set. So they are actively giving opportunities and putting people into these seats for the first time. So, yeah.
Well, it's such an honor to know you. I do a ton of work here in my community here in Peoria, Illinois as well. And you being in Chicago, I feel like we need to just keep our synergy alive because there's probably so much good work that we can do together. And I admire you sitting on these boards because as much as you're helping the industry and your communities, I know as a leader myself how much I take from those experiences that then I pour back into my company. I'm a big believer that unless you're getting that outside perspective and having those wheels spin all the time on those macro level concepts, you can't really take your company where you want to go. So kudos to you.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you.